This sponge chat was quite special. All of them are special in their own right, but this one was really special in that I got to speak to someone who has been in our lovely industry for over 40 years, or almost 40 years, which is a very, very long time. And within that time, he has spent quite a lot of that focused on teacher education, on teacher training. And so his knowledge about teacher education is very, very deep. And so deep, in fact, that he wrote a book about moving from teaching to training with Matt Elman, who I've also interviewed for Spanish Chat. And of course, his name is Peter Lucantoni. And in this Spanish Chat, we looked at some of the issues around teacher education, but mainly focused on early career teacher educators. So for those of you out there that are looking to move into teacher education, there were some points in here that were quite important, I think. And for me, especially now as a manager, some of the points that were brought up related to the idea of providing opportunities for people to experiment with teacher training. Because a lot of us, Peter mentioned that a lot of these opportunities to work as teacher trainers, they're often not formal positions. And we kind of need to create the opportunities for teachers to experiment with teacher training so that they can actually, start, get involved, experiment. And I thought that was quite an important point. He was also speaking about the need for teachers to be very proactive, because you need to seek out these opportunities. There is a lot of work that you need to do beforehand, very often for free even. But we need to be proactive with that. But as a manager, I think there's also an important takeaway there, that we need to create these opportunities. I'm looking forward to hearing what you think about that. As we moved through the talk, we also looked at some advice that Peter has for teachers looking to move into teacher training. And of course, we had some very good book recommendations, many of which have already been recommended on Sponge Chats. And so I view this as another reason why we should all be reading them. Anyway, I will leave you to it. I hope you enjoyed this Sponge Chat. I do look forward to hearing your comments. So please comment on YouTube or LinkedIn, or get in touch with me, and I'll get back to you shortly. Have a great day. Well, Peter, again, thank you very much for being here. The idea of Sponge Chats came, a long time ago. I got an email from someone who asked how I moved into teacher education, and I realized that the path that people take to get into teacher training or teacher education are quite different sometimes. And so I started speaking to different people around the world. And now it's kind of evolved into looking at all sorts of other stuff as well. But today we're here to look at sort of perspectives, and obviously you're very, very well renowned within our industry for teacher training, and of course you've just recently released a book with Matt, and so hopefully we get to speak a lot about this today, in the time that I have you. So my first question though is, who is Peter?
There's a good question. I'm not sure I know myself, actually. Well, obviously, I've had a very long career in English language teaching. In fact, it's the only thing I've ever done in my adult working life. I think I actually had a part-time job at a petrol station when I was a teenager. But other than that, I've pretty much been involved in language teaching, for 40 plus years. So starting off as a teacher. Doing a bit of traveling around mainly Europe, Middle East, and did my CELTA, which the days when I did it was called CTEFLA. Did a master's degree because that seemed to be the way to go. But I think I've been very lucky, Jim, in that I've sort of fallen into quite nice jobs during my career, and I think, because I started obviously earlier than you did, things were not quite as strict, if that's the right term.
Right.
about
Okay.
qualifications and so on. So I did sort of land quite easily into training, um, without any training myself, really. And I've just sort of built on it and developed from there. So it's been wonderful. It's been a really great career. I've been very lucky. Met wonderful people, done loads of traveling, working with Cambridge.
Yeah.
But even before working with Cambridge as a freelancer, I got to go to lots and lots of places for work. And now I live in Cyprus, in the
Yeah.
Mediterranean, which is also not too bad either. Yeah.
Can't complain with that, right?
No.
You mentioned something that I think many of us will connect with in this idea that we may move into teacher training kind of without any formal qualifications. I mean, I still think
Yeah.
that's kind of quite common nowadays.
Yeah.
And many people that move into teacher training kind of do so because there's an opportunity that arises.
Yeah.
Would you agree with this? You think that's still quite common now, and people are still dealing with this, perhaps these thoughts of, well, I don't really have these qualifications. Am I supposed to be here?
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing to remember is that there isn't a formal qualification for being a teacher trainer. There isn't an equivalent CELTA or Delta or TESOL or whatever. So there's nothing to certify that somebody is a trainer.
Yeah.
Obviously, Cambridge has the train the trainer course, and I know other organisations offer courses for people who want to become trainers, but there's no official accreditation. There's also very few benchmarks or sort of global standardization about what makes a good trainer. I mean, there's plenty of frameworks about what makes a good teacher. And courses like CELTA and Delta have criteria, and tick boxes, and you didn't do this and you didn't do that and so on. But for training, there are a couple of frameworks. Cambridge has one and British Council has one, and I think there's a couple of others around. But we don't have the tick boxes. We don't have criteria as such. So from that side of things, it's difficult to know what makes a good trainer. And equally, there's no way of accrediting trainers, really. So yes, I think even nowadays, people still tend to fall into the job of being a trainer, and then possibly realizing that actually it's not quite as easy as people think it might be, and it's definitely not the same with teaching.
No, definitely, I completely agree. So I think going back to your kind of history, then, why the move into teacher training? What was kind of the impetus there for that? Because you started teaching, and then I imagine you went into the idea of teaching. Why that route?
Like I said, Jim, I was really lucky because I was actually working in a language institute in Muscat, in Oman, back in the when was this? The early 90s, and it was an international house franchise. And I think the only other language school in Muscat at the time was the British Council, and possibly Polyglot. I think there were the three of us who were sort of competing. And I was actually director of studies there at the time, and the institute was running the old C-TEFLA courses. I wasn't involved in them. And then, as often happens, one day a trainer couldn't come in, they were taken ill, and we had to cover the session. So I said, I think I can probably do that. And I did. And I even remember to this day, it was a session on language awareness conditionals. I can still remember now what I did, and I've used similar materials and similar approach, even today. So I fell into it. I realised that I obviously made a fairly good stab at it, and I sort of built on it from there. And not long after that, I actually left Oman and moved to Cyprus and was working in a language school here. And I said to the owner, why don't we do teacher training? Offer teacher training courses, which we did. And yeah, it's
And
sort of snowballed from there. Since then, I've done far more training than I have teaching.
hmm.
Although that's not necessarily a good thing, but yeah, that's basically been what I've done for the last 30 years is teacher training, pretty much.
Yeah, okay. Very interesting. Um, it's so there was no sort of decision on your behalf. Okay, I wanted to be a teacher trainer. There wasn't a that wasn't in your mind, right?
I think there probably was actually. I think I did it and I thought, oh, I quite like this.
Okay, okay.
Because I think, whether you're a teacher or a trainer, you're basically a show off, aren't you? You're an actor. You like standing up there and you like doing all of this and you like people applauding and saying they've enjoyed it, and I think, as teachers and as trainers, as educators, that's part of it. We get a real kick
Yeah.
out of it. And I think maybe working with adults, I don't know, maybe I found it more rewarding than working with younger people. I don't know really.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Interesting.
I'm not an expert in teaching young kids, KG and primary. It's not really my thing. I mean, I'll do it, but it's not really my thing. Teenagers, okay, but I think I actually do prefer working with adults,
In the
and
adult
that's
context,
probably
right?
why I sort of pushed myself into working more with teachers. I think also, sorry to extend the answer, but I think also I found teacher training more creative because, with teaching, there are course books, there are multiple course books. I know that we adapt them and we change things, and basically we have a course book. But with teacher training, you don't. It's very much about what you as the trainer can come up with and can create. There aren't books of resources. Well, there are a couple, but generally there isn't. And so it's up to the individual to design, create, write, content which is relevant for a particular group of teachers. And I think I
Yes.
quite like that.
That's also quite difficult at times, right? To do that effectively. I mean, for the questions, we're going to speak about sort of early career teacher educators now. And one of them questions was, what difficulties or what characterizes early career teacher educators or teacher trainers? I think back to my own, the first year or two of working in teacher education.
Yeah.
And it was very much trying to find my way, realizing that, as you mentioned, it is different to teaching, to teaching English as it were. And there are a few more factors come in. So I suppose, from your opinion, then, what are the sort of what are some of the difficulties that teachers face in their initial years moving in to teacher training?
I think the thing that you've just been mentioning, which I mentioned, is the lack of resources, because there isn't a lot around. In fact, Matt Ellman and I, we produced our methodology book on, from teacher to trainer. One of the things we're thinking about now is adding maybe some bespoke materials for people to use, just as sort of a starting block. That's something that we might be doing in the near future. But I think another challenge, and it's a very real challenge, and I see it all the time. Teachers will do a train the trainer course, and then they don't do any training. They don't have any opportunities for training. The organisations which they work in don't have opportunities for them to actually get the practical side of it. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge that new trainers face, or people who want to become trainers, is that the organisations they're working for actually don't provide opportunities. And even if they do, I mean, for example, I've done goodness knows how many train the trainer courses with different universities. And, you've got 20 teachers on a course. There's no way an organisation is going to have PD opportunities for 20 teachers on a regular basis. It's lucky if they have one PD a semester. With teaching, it's different because you teach 4 or 5 hours every day of the week, every month of the year. So you're building up hundreds and hundreds and thousands of hours of experience in classroom situations. But new trainers will never ever get to that point. And it's something that I always say on train the trainer courses is you're never going to be like me because my career is a trainer. Your career is teachers. So unless you can actually find a job which is called teacher trainer, you're never going to have opportunities in the way that I have. I'm not saying that means there can't be trainers, but going back to your question, what are the challenges? That I think is the challenge, is that they get all the theory from the course, but what they've got to do is stand up and actually do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real challenge. And I think it can be quite disappointing for trainers and disheartening as well, that they've, made the effort of doing a course and they've shown willingness and they've probably, done some micro training and showed they're actually pretty good, but then no opportunity to do it beyond that.
I think that comes back to this idea of, the importance of having, at an organizational level, these opportunities for teachers to expand, experiment with teacher education. Maybe they want to try it, maybe they do it, they don't like it, but at least they have the opportunity. As a director of studies now, like we actively try to create opportunities for our teachers to take on workshop, to engage in mentoring. But I realize in the places that I've worked before that that's not always that common. And as you mentioned, quite disheartening for those that I remember. I was in a place some years ago, and I wanted to experiment, but not only was there no opportunities, management didn't really want to provide those opportunities, which was a shame, I think. But the reality of many situations. Okay, very interesting. You mentioned resources, and we are going to come back to your book in a bit more time, because I want to go. I do want to go into that because it's very interesting. It's very good. I was actually at IHFL recently with Matt, and I was able to get into it a little bit. But focusing on teacher trainers, perhaps even in general, once we move into teacher training and we are actually training. Whether that's through workshops, through coaching, through mentoring, whatever it might be. I mean, personally, myself, I found that even in organizations that have positions for teacher educators, there's very little actual development at an institutional level that's provided for trainers. So my question is, how do trainers develop? Now, you mentioned one thing, and that's obviously through experience, through training. But are there other ways in which teacher trainers, teacher educators actively develop that you know of?
I don't think it's very different from how teachers develop, actually. I think well, first of all, you need to be proactive, because it's not going to come to you. You've got to make the effort. And ITEFL is a good example. Go and put in a proposal to present at a conference. I mean, the chances of presenting at ITEFL are slim, because it's so difficult nowadays to be given a slot. But I think that's one thing that all trainers need to be doing, is finding opportunities to present. You're not going to get paid for it. You may get only 2 people turning up, but just to go through the process, I think that's a key part of it. I think also, even within your school, even within your university, wherever you're working, is again, be proactive. Go to your head of department or director of studies or whoever and say, look, I would like to work with teachers on this. I'll do it in my own time. I don't want to be paid. I think it's all of that side. It's offering yourself up for opportunities. But all the usual stuff, attending online webinars and all of that. But that's no different from what teachers should be doing, really. But yeah, I would say be proactive more than anything, and because, as you say, unless you've actually got a job, then you're not going to have opportunities. So you need to be proactive about it and find the opportunities for yourself, I think.
I really connect with what you said about you're doing a lot of stuff for free almost. And I remember when I first said to myself that I wanted to move into teacher training. So I started planning workshops, planning to do at conferences, started writing on my blog. hours and hours of stuff that I still don't get paid for. but that actually provided much more, let's say, visibility externally.
Exactly.
And so
Yeah.
I was able to get a lot. I mean, now I work for Cambridge. Now I do a lot of other stuff for some other people. But like you mentioned, there's quite a lot in there at the start of being proactive and putting yourself out there. Do you think? So Matt said something that was quite interesting when I spoke to him on one of our sponge chats, and he spoke about this kind of this misconception that often training is giving ideas. Like we go there, our job is to go there and give teachers all these ideas. Kind of just like this, we're the giver of information, Would you agree that that's a misconception in terms of simplifying training?
I think it depends very much on your context, Jim, because I think in some contexts that's what teachers want.
Right.
They want you to make their life easier the next time they go into the classroom. They don't care about developing as teachers, with all due respect. It's not their goal in life. They just want to get through the day. So I sort of agree with Matt, but at the same time, I think in reality, certainly a lot of places that I go to, I look at the conditions that teachers are working in, and I'm absolutely horrified. Absolutely horrified. The lack of resources, the lack of support, the awful pay. I know teachers get awful pay everywhere, but really awful pay. They're treated no better than road sweepers, really. So it's not really surprising that what they care about more than anything is, please, can you give me an activity to motivate a group of 14-year-old boys and make them go away having learned something. So I think that is part of our job. Another example of conditions is, I think because of the pandemic, teachers having to teach 100 plus students online.
Yeah.
I hear that all the time. It's common. It's common. And unfortunately, some organizations have retained that because they've realized that they save money.
Yeah.
It's much better than having 4 classroom teachers teaching 30 kids each. Let's put them all in an online classroom and just have one teacher, so yeah. But ultimately, I guess what we should be doing, and what Matt's point is, that we want to help teachers to develop, and that isn't just giving them ideas. It's more than that. It's helping them to understand more about what we're trying to do with teaching and learning, getting them to reflect, getting them to make that journey from training room to classroom. How can you transfer things into the classroom? But more importantly, and I'm sure Matt used this word because it's a word that we use all the time, is impact. Have you actually had any impact on the classroom? And that's another challenge, actually, going back to one of your previous questions, is how do you know if you've had any impact? Because 9 times out of 10, maybe even 9.9 times out of 10, you train a group of teachers and then you never see them again. So you have no clue as to whether or not you're having any impact with them.
Yeah.
Different contexts require different things, I think.
Yeah, no, amazing points. I have so many areas to go down now. Impact, yes. I work in service, so I'm director of studies, but I also run the teacher development program in our academy. And obviously, we try to aim for high retention in our teachers. So we have some teachers for 3 or 4 years. So I think in my context, it's certainly not easy, but we found ways in which we can measure impact by evidencing things in their teaching and so on and so forth. But I can imagine on in-service courses that are just a once-off course or even a pre-service course, it is quite difficult to measure.
Yeah,
as you mentioned, you never see them again.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference for? I know that you travel around the world now and you do a lot of courses, especially with Train the Trainer and so on and so forth. But if you had to choose a type of course that you prefer, your favorite type, would it be a pre-service? Would it be in-service? Would it be working with a group of teachers for a long time? What would be your, if you could choose one, only one?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I used to do quite a lot of CELTA training, but I don't anymore. I mean, occasionally I do bits and pieces.
Mm.
Um, but my heart nowadays is really in train the trainer.
Train the trainer.
I've sort of taken it as my thing. Put a lot of time and effort into it. I've rewritten it now.
Mm.
You know, Matt and I wrote the book together. So I think there's something very special about working with experienced teachers and opening their eyes, to moving into that different role. I was in Turkey recently, in Istanbul. I did a full face-to-face train the trainer course there with, I think it was 22 teachers from 11 different universities across Turkey. So we had 2 teachers from each university. And just getting that, okay, even though they were all working in the same country, they were all, as I say, coming from 11 different universities. So different contexts, different backgrounds, bringing different levels of experience and knowledge. It was absolutely wonderful. It was really, really enriching for me. And I learned so much from doing it. Generally, recently, a lot of the courses I've done have been with a single university, particularly in Saudi Arabia, where they have very large universities, 200, 300, 400 teachers. So you get a group of teachers from the same context. And it's not as rewarding for me because they're all facing the same challenges in the same context and the same situation. It's still wonderful to do it, but I like teaching on courses where you've got people coming from different areas. What I'd love to do, of course, is to have a train the trainer course with teachers from different countries. That would be really great. I've never managed to do that yet, unfortunately.
Not yet.
Not yet, but hopefully one day soon. But yeah, I think working with adults and I love train the trainer and the whole concept of it and the ideas behind it.
Yeah. I had heard a rumor that they were kind of that Cambridge was aiming to stop the train the trainer, but now it seems like you've taken it up and revamped it and given it new life.
Train the trainer is no longer an official Cambridge product like CELTA.
Yeah.
It's no longer on the list of things that we offer, but I've had discussions with the powers that be at Cambridge, and I've said, look, we can't lose all of this wonderful content, all of this wonderful resource. Am I allowed to keep it going, but not as an official Cambridge product? Yeah, that's what we're now doing. That's why I've rewritten it. There's a direct connection now in the course with the book that Matt and I wrote. There's lots of examples from the book in the course which there didn't used to be. We've made it a lot more flexible, reduced the number of hours to make it easier for people to actually do the course. So no, it no longer exists as an official Cambridge product,
right.
But it does. Certainly in the area that I work in, it's we can do it, we can offer it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Very interesting. Because it's quite interesting though that change. Because when you move into teacher rotation, you're training teachers to work with students, but on the train the trainer, you're training teachers to work with teachers. Mm-hmm. What's the change? Is it simply a change in content there that you're focusing on, like looking at helping them become aware of how teachers learn and things like that, or is there a larger difference that we're missing?
I mean, interesting. The first chapter in the book and the first module in the course is about similarities and differences between teaching students and teaching teachers, because there are similarities, but there are also a lot of differences. I mean, just an obvious example: if you're teaching children, if you become a trainer, you're not going to be training children to become Teachers, obviously, so you immediately have an age difference. You have psychological differences. You have motivational differences. All of these things are key when we're thinking about the differences between teaching students and teaching adult teachers. But we also need to think about delivery and planning. And again, an early part of the trainer course is looking at a training session plan. How similar or different is it to a teaching lesson plan? They're not the same. I think there are more differences than there are similarities. I think one of the key things as well, and this often I think concerns new trainers, is one of the things that I know Matt does as well, is that we say to trainers, you're never going to be a really effective trainer unless you've got breadth and depth of knowledge about teaching and learning. And if a teacher has only had experience of a limited number of contexts, then they're going to find it challenging if they go out into the big wide world as a trainer. It's different if you're going to be training in your context. But how many people stay in the same context and job, for all their lives? That people don't. People move on, and they go to different countries. So I think it is important that anybody who wants to move into training does look quite carefully at their background and what they've done so far. And it's not just about where; it's also about what. Have you only taught IELTS for the last 5 years? Nothing wrong with IELTS, nothing wrong in doing it. It's great. It's good experience. But what about ESP? What about business courses? What about teaching young learners? What about teaching other exams? What about teaching classes with 70 students in rather than 10? There's all of that that's important, I think, as a trainer. I'm not saying that trainers need to have all the answers, but they need to be able to empathize with all of those different contexts and understand that teachers are coming from different contexts and they have different needs, different challenges.
Yeah, I think I spoke to Adrian Tennant, who also lives in Cyprus, by the way.
Yeah.
And he, we were talking about teacher education in different contexts. And he's done obviously a lot of work in sub-Saharan Africa. And he was telling me stories about some of the training experiences there. And it connected with one of the talks that we went to at IETFL with Amira Salama, who works for Africa ELTA. And she was telling us about sort of even the training conditions there, where, teachers are used to working with, upwards of 100 students in their classes with no resources. And then they come to conferences, and sometimes they don't even have a building to do the conference in. Do you know what I mean? Like completely different to where I am in sort of a European context. And I think what you mentioned there is quite important for us to realize. And it's one of the reasons why I've tried to get people from, different parts of the world to share their perspectives. And I can imagine yourself, obviously you've done a lot of traveling and trained in a lot of different contexts. So I imagine that you would agree that it's very context specific, I imagine, in terms of what you're bringing there and kind of what teachers need or even what trainers need there.
Yeah, I think it's, a lot of this is about understanding the context and understanding what teachers need before you can do anything else. Because, we had an example quite recently from a university in Saudi. They told me, well, our teachers are having problems teaching large classes. Can you put together something on teaching large classes? Yeah, of course we can. Let's get some background. So, what do you mean by a large class? And this example I gave earlier, they're teaching 100 plus students online. And, I was actually quite honest with them. And I said, thank goodness I've never, ever in my life had to teach a class of students online. That number, I've worked with teachers, hundreds, possibly thousands sometimes online. But that's not the same as trying to teach, a group of young adults communicative language. I've just never done it. So that doesn't mean I can't do it. but it means I need to stop and I really need to think and I need to come up with not solutions because I don't know if they're going to work, but just a way of helping the teachers struggle through whatever it is that they're faced with. So yeah, context, knowing the context, understanding the context, showing empathy, and trying to come up with solutions. Even though I've just said I don't know if there's solutions, but I think we do need to come up with ideas and suggestions to help teachers. And I think it's also a lot of the work of a trainer. It is about empathizing and never saying to teachers what they're doing is right or wrong, because unless you're actually there in the context with them, there's no way that you can possibly know if what they're doing is right or wrong, or it's going to work or it isn't going to work. And I think that's what one of the things that possibly Matt was saying is that it's about getting teachers to think more about their context and what, rather than saying, oh my goodness, no, it's horrible, I've got all these students and I don't know what to do, give me another job. No, it's about looking at your situation and seeing what can be done so that you can have more impact. You're never going to win all of the battles, are you? Ever. It's impossible. No. And you have to accept that, I think, as a teacher and as a trainer, that you're never, ever going to be 100% successful. That's just impossible. But I think it's important that we get people to stop and reflect and think and share, actually, because teachers can learn a lot from each other. I think teachers often forget that they can probably learn just as much from each other as they can, from a trainer who doesn't really know their context very well.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I'm not sure if it was Matt who was saying, I think it was, he was saying that, normally teacher training starts in the context, sharing ideas with other teachers, having their sense of community there, working out their problems internally. That's kind of where the beginnings of teacher training starts. Which I think is quite important. Yes, it's something very interesting to keep in mind. Okay, we get to the second last part of the sponge chat. Advice. Now, you've touched on quite a few pieces of advice so far, so I just want to go over some of them. You mentioned the idea of breadth and depth, having experience. If a teacher's looking to move into teacher education, or even if they're an early career teacher trainer and they're looking to get better at teacher training, get experience in various different things. You mentioned being proactive, taking that step and asking management for those opportunities. Are there any other pieces of advice that you might add to those two?
Well, I think reading, reading about our profession, reading what other people have got to say about our profession, because I think it's important as trainers that we're constantly backing up what we're saying to teachers with research and things that other people have said to support what it is that we're trying to get teachers to do. Because teachers are not stupid. We shouldn't treat them as being stupid. We should make them understand the rationales behind what it is that we're suggesting. Teaching in the classroom, it's very much about do this, do this, do this, do this. But when you're working with teachers, it's do this, and this is why you should be doing this. And that's the connection with the impact. If you don't do this, we're not saying it's wrong, but if you don't do this, you may be losing out on something. So why don't you try doing this and seeing what happens as a result? And the reason I'm telling you this is because Mickey Mouse said, this, and the research shows us. So I think it's important as a trainer to read, even though nobody, of course, has any time for reading, but, we should make an effort to read. Interestingly, I was chatting with a colleague yesterday, and she asked me she was designing a presentation on emotional development for young learners and their teachers. and linking emotional development in the classroom with things that students do. Anyway, we had a chat and did a little that, and then just suddenly this morning in my inbox I had my monthly edition of the EL Gazette. I don't know if you heard of it. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm just quickly flicking through it. Do I want to read anything? And the last section is on emotional development. So I immediately forwarded it to my colleague. I haven't really had time to read it properly yet, but that's a good example of if you're interacting with publications, you quite often do, that might be useful.
Yes.
And usually it will have references, and that can take you off, to some other bits and pieces, and then you can pull that into whatever it is that you're working on. Most things that we read in journals, etc., you can take them and adapt them and make them fit whatever it is that you're trying to say. And I think that's a good piece of advice for people. You've got to have credibility, Jim. You can't stand up there and pretend, to be the font of all knowledge, because you're not, and you have to accept that. You have to show that you're well read and that you will take on board what other people are saying. And very importantly, and I think this is what teachers often find difficult, is making links between the research and the practice. That's a big part of what we have to do as trainers, is make connections.
Wow. I mean, you've just touched something that's very close to my heart, this idea of reading and connecting things to practice and helping teachers see that connection. In fact, the IETF Silvana Richardson was giving a talk on the importance of this specific thing, providing them with, it's helping them see the research in a practical manner. Like this, you do this because of X, Y, and Z. Yeah. So yeah, thank you very much for giving that piece of advice, which is also quite nice because it links to my last part, which is book recommendations, which are hopefully we're going to talk about your book and any others that you have in mind. So first, maybe we can talk about your book first, From Teacher to Trainer. Obviously, you wrote this with Matt, and I think it came out. It must be a year ago now.
A year ago
now. Yeah.
Yeah.
What should people expect to find inside this? Now, I have to say, before you say that there are videos with this book, which, to be honest, I didn't know until I actually picked it up. I just want people to know that there's lots of interactive content inside, but maybe you can give us a bit more detail.
I think originally it was my idea originally to produce the book, and the idea was to basically flesh out the old Cambridge Train the Trainer course into a book. When I got Matt involved, it sort of changed radically because Matt had some really brilliant ideas about what the book should look like. So it sort of changed a bit from my original vision. And, Matt really was the impetus for the whole thing. And the book is as it is because of Matt. So what's in the book? There are 10 chapters, and it sort of follows a trainer development, if you like, the journey of a trainer. And as I said earlier, what's the difference between being a teacher and being a trainer? It begins with that. And then it looks at how and what goes into a training session. What does it look like? What makes a good training session? What do we need to be aware of? We spend a lot of time on looking at aims for training sessions, because in our experience, it's an area that trainers find incredibly difficult, to identify what their aims are. I mean, it's a teaching issue as well, isn't it? Inexperienced teachers, even experienced teachers, find it difficult to define what their aims are. And even if they're able to define what their aims are, when you look at the actual plan, you're thinking, well, what's the connection between your aim and, what you're actually doing? And I think that's a big part of Train the Trainer, is helping teachers understand the importance of aims. So there's, we spend time on that. The book also talks about how to help teachers to stage a training session, what needs to go into it, We talk a lot about where do teachers get knowledge from? And obviously, teachers get knowledge from a trainer, but where does the trainer get the knowledge from? And of course, that goes back to when I was making earlier about research, but we can't just, keep giving teachers research. So there's a lot, we talk a lot in the book about where trainers can get input from, for example, critical incidents, examples of student writing, conversations between a director of studies and a teacher. All of that can be used as input. It's what Rod Ellis calls data. He talks about giving teachers data, and then we design activities around that particular data. So yeah, we spend a lot of time on that, and then the book moves into another area, a very important area for trainers. Usually not all trainers, but how do we evaluate teachers? How do we talk to teachers? What's the type of language that we should be using with teachers? So there's a lot of advice on that. Things we should be looking out for in classrooms. And then towards the end of the book, there's a section, what you've already asked me about is how do trainers develop? Because, we talk a lot about teacher development, but we also need to think about trainer development as well. Just because you're a trainer doesn't mean that you're at the end. There's still plenty of things that need to be done.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to leave a link to this, and when I do get a copy of it, I'm going to review it, because I usually write reviews on my blog. At the moment, I'm completing my MA, so my reading is very much focused on the modules that I'm doing, but that will be changing afterwards. And it does sound, and like I mentioned, I picked it up and I was there with Matt having a look at it. And there's so much in there. And as I mentioned, there are lots of videos that with the QR code, people can scan them and watch some stuff in there as well. So a really, really useful resource, I think. Thinking about other books that you might recommend, do you have 2 or 3 that you might recommend for people looking to move into teacher training or interested in teacher education in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think a key book which I often go back to because I used it on my MA many years ago is actually written by my MA tutor at the time, a guy called Michael Wallace, who you might have come across, University of Edinburgh. The book's called Training Foreign Language Teachers. I doubt he'd get away with that title nowadays. A really great book. And as I said, I used it extensively in my MA, which focused on teacher development. So I would strongly recommend that. It's published by Cambridge. Another one is Tessa Woodward's very, very famous book, Models and Metaphors in Language Teaching, which is a great insight into teacher learning. Another very good one is Randall